Our first female chancellor and surrounding cabinet members and prime minister are in a bit of a pickle. Well, yes, I know they're actually in quite a few pickles, but I'm trying to stick to the financial one. They need, and quite rightly want, to spend more money. But as we all know, they pledged, promised, manifestoed, if that's a thing, that they wouldn't raise any of the taxes which could actually raise enough money to plug their various black holes: income tax, VAT and national insurance for employees. So what to do? Now, as you may or may not know, I'm not a one-man think tank or statistical body of any kind, so I can't go into the figures. But they are big, and none or even all of the on-the-spot fines or taxes I've long wanted to introduce come the revolution for things that annoy me, and if they annoy me, I'm sure that they annoy most people, none of those would come even close. Even male flip-flop wearing on high streets at this time of year, shaven heads with full beards, why would you? Poorly loaded dishwashers, the list goes on. How long have you got? Anyway, if you're not going to focus on annoying things, and I admit that can be a little subjective, one person's tattoo is another's body art and all that, well then, who or what, as working people are ruled out, who are you going to tax? Well, the rich, of course. Now, the current definition of the rich, income-wise, is effectively anyone earning over £100,000. That's when you lose your personal allowance, then the amount that you can put into your pension starts to be eroded, and shortly after that, your tax rate goes from 40 to 45%. Many would argue, though, that that's not a tax on the rich, but a tax on the hard-working. And this is where arguments for a proper wealth tax come in, which is not a tax on their income. That was tried by the Labour government in the 1960s and 70s. Listen to George Harrison's Taxman. Not income, but on their assets. Now, I heard an interview with Gary Stevenson this week. I read and reviewed Gary's book about his time as the youngest and most successful trader at a city bank. He's a proper East Ender make good, who now preaches his own and very convincing economic argument. The rich, he rightly says, have become a lot richer than the rest of us, in relative terms, who have become a lot poorer, certainly since the financial crash and probably before. If you get to billionaire status, what he calls your passive income, generated by the assets you own, will be much more than you can spend, maybe even £1 million a week. So the very rich use that money to buy more assets, property, shares and so on. Even they can only have so many yachts, cars, wives or husbands, and that pushes up the prices of property, shares or whatever, and so they get richer, and everything else becomes more expensive and harder for the rest of us, not necessarily the poor, but the squeezed middle, more difficult for us to afford, and so it goes on. So if you accept that that's a thing, what can you do about it? Well, get some of it now. A wealth tax on the value of assets, and stop it being passed on. Inheritance tax. Now, in the days of Downton Abbey, it was not so easy for the lords and ladies, seeing their big estates broken up by death duties, to simply ship out and move somewhere with lower taxes. Dubai was a lot of sand back then, and living anywhere else was exile, not expatting. Now, if you have the money, you can live pretty much anywhere, and low tax Dubai is a tasty option if you could stand it. And here's the circular argument. If you try to tax them in this day and age, they simply go somewhere that doesn't tax them, and it's still the rest of us who end up paying. The amount paid in inheritance tax is rising. It will rise still further with the changes coming in, which will include pensions, farms, small company investments and so on. And it's those in the middle, not the super rich, who are paying and are going to pay. So round we go in yet another philosophical circle. We need to tax the super wealthy. They can afford it. They have the broadest shoulders. but it won't work, and it never has. Anyway, to finish on a slight tangent and put some of this all in context, we used to talk about millionaires, not billionaires. And when governments are talking these days about their spending and deficits, they talk in trillions. What does all that mean? Well, here's a great way I heard to appreciate those numbers. If you went back in time by 1,000,000 seconds, it would be 12 days ago. If you went back 1,000,000,000 seconds, it would be nearly 32 years ago. John Major would still be Prime Minister. Go back 1,000,000,000,000 seconds and it would be the Ice Age, 32,000 years ago, which puts those numbers in pretty mind-blowing context, doesn't it?